Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to my yard. Not feeling my office today. We're gonna do this one out in the wild, in nature. Don't mind me looking at my phone. I did a video where I taught some fancy licks last month, and in that video, I asked folks if they wanted me to break down those licks, and a bunch of you said, "Yeah, look at all the comments around me." Wow. So I'm not going to necessarily break down those licks specifically, but we might reference them a little bit. But more importantly, what I'm going to teach you to do is just how to break down licks in general. And of course, a couple of notes before we get started. I'm going to use some scary music words in here. So if you're not a fan of scary music theory words, let me give the lesson really quick just for you. Break down the licks. Good luck. If you are a fan of scary music theory words, or if you're at least open to the concept, then stick around. The other thing is, as you can see, I'm going to do this whole thing without a guitar in my hands. And that's because I expect you to be following along with your guitar and looking at the diagrams. Then you can participate in the lesson like actively instead of passively, and hopefully you'll get more out of it. You're a big boy and or girl, so you can figure it out. All right, so the first thing we want to talk about is the palette. You can do this when you're transcribing too. You want to hear what things are made up of. Most of the notes in a lick are probably from, a given kind of scale or something else. So let's talk about what those things can be. In the smallest possible note set, your lick might be made up of an arpeggio of chord tones. You think of like just a basic triad, a simple major chord or a minor chord. There's only 3 notes in there. So a lot of times, if licks are made up out of small palettes, they might be made up of an arpeggio. Similarly, the next thing is a pentatonic scale. Pentatonic scales, like the lick from My Girl, that is a pentatonic scale. That's only a 5-note scale. So that's also a relatively small note set that you should be able to hear, whether that be major pentatonic or minor pentatonic. The next note set is like more of like a diatonic scale, which is a 7-note scale, like a full major scale, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, or a full minor scale. And last would be chromatic, right? All 12 notes in the chromatic series. So once again, going through that, an arpeggio, if it's a simple arpeggio of a simple chord, could be as little as 3 notes. Next, we have a pentatonic scale, which could be 5 notes. After that, we have a major scale, which could be 7 notes. And then if you have the chromatic series, well, then you have 12 notes at your disposal. And those like range very, very broadly. And hopefully you can hear that in licks. Hopefully you can hear that in pieces of music. So let's take a look at about the first lick that I played last week. I don't remember what it was, but let's see if we can identify some note sets. So if we look at the first lick, I can see we're playing over a D chord. So if this is some kind of D arpeggio, I would expect a lot of D chord tones. And indeed I do. In this first measure, I can see an A note. That would be the 5th of a D chord. I can see the C note, be the 7th of a D chord. I can see the D note itself. It's actually the first note in the measure. That would be the root. And then later on, I get an F sharp. That would be the 3rd of the chord. If you look at this brutally, there's only 3 notes in the first measure that aren't chord tones of D7. That leads me to believe that this might be some kind of arpeggio. Not an arpeggio in the strict sense that it's all the chord tones in order or something, but like this lick is made out of chord tones. So however you want to say that, that's probably what's important to us if we break it down. Let's talk about the next thing before we go any further. So the next thing you want to look for is you want to look for the construction. How did they take the palette and then assemble it? So for instance, I was just talking about how, these are all notes in a chord, but it's not a strict arpeggio, just like hello, 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 like that kind of thing. It might be kind of out of order or jumbled a little bit, right? It might not just be like root up to the extensions if there are any. Instead, there could be like a sequence. You think of like Blackberry Blossom, do ba da and dee ba da and do ba da ba dee ba da ba. It's kind of got this repeating sequence, this repeating organizing of the notes of the G major scale, right? It could also be like an intervallic game, right? You could have a bunch of things in thirds. Think of the tag to Turkey in the Straw, where it goes dee doo da, right? That's like a third interval, another third interval, and then the root. It could be totally linear, right? It could be linear. It could be do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. There's no reason it couldn't be that either. It could also be like double stops, something that I can't sing in an example for you because I'm just one person. You could imagine the construction could be just about anything, right? Anything that you can identify in the lick about how it's put together. Let's go back to lick 1. Let's see if we can find anything in the construction. For instance, just off the top of my head, I see 2 moments there in measures 1 and 2 where I have a pretty wide interval. First time it's a 6th. The next time, what is that, a 5th? Yeah. All right. So it seems like wide intervals are important to this lick. What's another thing I see in here? Well, I can tell you something that I see all the time, which is an enclosure. So if we look right smack dab in the middle of measure 1, I have a G note followed by an F note, followed by an F sharp. And if you think about it, it's like I'm playing right above where I want to land, right below where I want to land, and then in the middle, right where I want to land. The other thing that I see that's very interesting to me, that kind of crosses both bounds, is this dirty third thing, which I've talked about on the channel a million times before. But this idea that you have like the minor third and the major third, and you play them back and forth, you mix them up. So you get like B flat and B, or B flat down to A. That kind of like mixing around of the third. Am I in G major or in G minor? You play with that notion a little bit, right? So I can see that in measures 2 and 3 of this lick. B flat up to B, B flat up to B, B flat up to B. It happens quite a few times, which brings us to the very last thing on our list, which is the context. When we break down the licks, we ask, what is it made out of? How did you put it together? And then what context is it useful in? And sure, that can be the context of a song, in which case our answer is already there, right? In the tab, I've already written out the chord changes up above. So you think, when I got a D chord going to a G chord, this is a type of lick that I could probably get in. That's true. That is absolutely true. You could also ask yourself some other questions. Like, does this lick have to do with open strings, right? If I take a look back at that first lick and I check out how everything is really closed up until the middle of the second measure when I get that open G string, is the rest of that lick going to be difficult to play if I don't have that open root? If I don't have the root note, the key that I'm in, as an open string. Well, in this case, not really, but it could have been so. In this case, I could just change all of these open Gs to 5th fret on the D string. The lick would still work quite well. But that could be a contextual thing that would matter to us too. Sometimes because of the way the guitar is laid out, the ergonomics of the lick are only going to work in certain contexts. Maybe they only work in certain keys. Maybe they only work in certain parts of the fretboard. Maybe they only work with certain open strings like we just discussed. Blah, 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 blah. You get my point. So now that we got those things, let's look at the next lick. So we have lick number 2 from the video. I can see right away that this palette is kind of an interesting one. I mean, this is a type of lick that I play a lot. A lot of people call this kind of thing the Marcel lick. Hopefully this is kind of a hip variation of it. I don't know how well I succeeded. Ignoring the first 2 notes, this little pickup thing, this little pickup dirty third thing, I can see that I have the root, then the dirty third, major to minor third, and I play that minor third a couple more times down to A. So it's already kind of a muddy palette. Is it more major? Is it more minor? Tough question to answer. I look at what happens on the B string. G, F natural, E. Well, F natural is a little more minor, right? It's a little more bluesy. In G major, I would expect F sharp. If I didn't get that here. If it was a G major pentatonic scale, it wouldn't have an F at all. With all the notes that I've got, it certainly can't be an arpeggio. And then suddenly after that, I have D, C sharp, C. Okay, definitely not an arpeggio, definitely not a pentatonic scale. What's going on, right? This little passage of 2 measures, well, boy, it takes some thinking if you want to analyze it. You can look at it a couple different ways. How I might look at it, because I do get a G, an A, a B, a D, and an E, I do get all of the notes of the G major pentatonic scale, but I also get all 3 common blue notes: flat 3, B flat, flat 5, C sharp, flat 7, F natural. One way I might look at this is just G major pentatonic with every single blue note. And that would do it. That would do the job. That would explain it. And when I look at the construction, it's a fairly linear construction. The lick generally descends. Contextually, where does it work? Well, it looks like it works in a specific part of the fretboard, specifically box 3 of the G major pentatonic, because all the blue notes all line up on fret 6. Fret 6 of the high E string is the minor third. Fret 6 of the B string is flat 7. Fret 6 of the G string is the flat 5. So that's pretty interesting. Maybe someone wrote this lick because if you go up to box 3 of the G major pentatonic and descend in a linear fashion, you can toss in every single blue note on the way down, and they all appear on the 6th fret. Wouldn't that be smart if someone came up with that? Did I come up with that? I don't think so. I think I stole this lick probably. Lastly, let's look at the end of the lick. This lick ends with another 6th, very reminiscent of lick number 1. And then we have an enclosure, followed by another enclosure. Then we eventually land on G. Interesting stuff. All right, let's play that same game again. So if we look at the first C lick that I played, so it does look vaguely 5-note scale-ish, but it's not directly a C major scale. I know because it's got that B flat in it. Kind of an interesting note, which makes me feel like it's almost more of an arpeggio. Oh my gosh, what if those first 5 notes were an arpeggio? What's a 5-note chord that has all those notes in it? Quick, leave it in the comments down below. That's right, correct. Good job, Michael Mark. It is a C9 chord. You guessed correctly. Or could it be some kind of altered C major pentatonic where I've just raised the 6th up a half step to the flat 7? Yeah, it could be that too. Good job, whoever that was that said that. Good job analyzing. What about this lick that I played that's literally all enclosures? That's kind of interesting, right? It seems like that lick is a lot more about the construction than it is about the palette. Whereas the one that we just looked at over the C chord is a lot more about the palette than the construction. The construction's kind of boring. It just ascends. Okay, that's enough looking at licks. I think you guys get my point. After you figured out that stuff, after you figured out what it's made out of, how it's put together, and where it's used, you should take one of those concepts and you should twist it. Can I change the lick a little bit so I can use it in a different context? Maybe a different place in a song, a different place in a chord change, in a different part of the fretboard, right? Or ask yourself a different question. If I take this lick, can I change a little bit of the construction to make it more interesting? Instead of it being so linear, could it have a backstep in it? Could it have some intervallic play? Could it have some cross picking? Could it be any structural change to make the lick more interesting to me? Lastly, could I take the lick and change the palette? Could I make the lick more chromatic? Could I make it more pentatonic? Could I slip an arpeggio in? Could I do anything like that to maybe make the lick more interesting to me? There you go. You can break something down. You can understand how it works. You can make new stuff. Yeah, I'm going to go water the yard. Thanks for watching. Hey, why don't you hit subscribe if you want to hit subscribe? And if you're not a member yet, remember you can become a member of the channel. Hit subscribe, then hit that join button. Thank you so much. This video is sponsored by the Lessons with Marcel merch, even though I wasn't wearing any. You know what? Consider getting some merch. And I'll see you all later.